Isaac Newton, the man who discovered gravity after an apple fell on his head, right? Well, not exactly. That story is only the tip of the iceberg. What if I told you that Newton's famous laws of motion hide secrets far deeper than we were ever taught in school? Some of these ideas were almost lost to history, and others, well, they might just change the way you see the world. Newton's 3 laws of motion are the foundation of physics. They explain why things move, stop, and react the way they do. But what if I told you that Newton wasn't just a scientist? He was also an alchemist, a philosopher, and even a bit of a rebel. Today, we're diving into the hidden side of Newton's laws, the forgotten origins, the misconceptions, and the surprising ways they shape everything around us. Newton's first law, also called the law of inertia, says that an object at rest stays at rest, and an object in motion stays in motion unless acted upon by an outside force. Sounds simple, right? But Newton wasn't the first to think of this. Way back in the 5th century, an Indian mathematician named Brahmagupta had similar ideas about motion. And even before that, the Greek philosopher Aristotle had his own theories. The problem? Aristotle got it wrong. He thought that objects needed a force to keep moving. It wasn't until Galileo Galilei, nearly 2,000 years later, that the idea of inertia really took shape. So did Newton actually discover the first law? It's not exactly he was just the first to prove it mathematically. But what's really interesting is how Newton connected this idea to the entire universe. He believed that inertia didn't just apply to objects, it applied to planets, stars, and everything in motion. This was revolutionary, and it set the stage for the next big discovery. Newton's second law is the most famous equation in physics. Force equals mass times acceleration. But did you know this law was almost completely misunderstood for centuries? Before Newton, most people believed that heavier objects naturally fell faster than lighter ones. But Newton shattered that idea by proving that acceleration depends on force, not weight. This discovery was so powerful that it paved the way for space travel. Think about it, every rocket that launches into space follows Newton's second law. The more force a rocket engine produces, the faster it accelerates. Without this equation, we wouldn't have satellites, moon landings, or even the possibility of Mars colonization. But here's a fun twist. Newton originally wrote his equations in a way that modern scientists still debate. Some physicists argue that he meant force was the rate of change of momentum, not just mass times acceleration. This subtle difference might actually change how we understand physics in extreme conditions like near black holes. Newton's third law is one we all know. For every action, there is an equal and opposite reaction. But what most people don't realize is that this idea extends far beyond physics. Newton himself believed that this law applied to everything, even politics and human behavior. In fact, his personal writings suggest he saw the world as a system of forces constantly pushing and pulling. Think about it, why do conflicts escalate? Why do social movements happen? Because whenever a force is applied, whether it's in nature or society, there's always a reaction. And here's a crazy historical twist. Newton may have secretly used this idea in his work with the British government. Yes, Newton was actually involved in tracking down counterfeiters while working at the Royal Mint. He understood that every action, crime, punishment, rebellion would trigger a response. Now here's something almost no one talks about. Newton wasn't just a scientist, he was also an alchemist. Yep, the same Isaac Newton who gave us the laws of motion spent years trying to turn lead into gold. He wrote thousands of pages on alchemy, searching for the mythical philosopher's stone, the substance said to grant immortality and unlimited wealth. But what's even weirder, some of his writings suggest that he saw a connection between physics and alchemy. He believed the universe was governed by hidden forces that science hadn't yet discovered. And guess what? Modern physics is starting to prove he wasn't entirely wrong. Concepts like dark matter, quantum mechanics, and even time travel challenge our understanding of forces in ways that Newton might have been on 2 centuries ago. Despite all his genius, Newton was not an easy person to get along with. In fact, he was so secretive and competitive that he almost never published his laws of motion. When Newton first developed his ideas, he kept them hidden for years. Why? Because he was terrified that another scientist like Robert Hooke would steal his work. It wasn't until the astronomer Edmund Halley convinced him to publish his masterpiece, Principia Mathematica, that the world finally learned about Newton's laws. And fun fact, Newton and Hooke had such a bitter feud that when Hooke died, Newton supposedly destroyed the only known portrait of him out of spite. Newton's laws weren't just scientific breakthroughs. They were a new way of thinking about the universe. They shaped everything from modern engineering to space exploration to the way we understand time and motion itself. But beyond the equations and formulas, Newton's story is proof that even geniuses have their flaws. He was secretive, competitive, and even a little obsessed with the unknown. Yet his discoveries changed the world in ways we're still uncovering today. So next time you drop your phone or launch a rocket in Kerbal Space Program, just remember you're witnessing the power of Newton's untold secrets in action. If you found these hidden truths about Newton's laws mind-blowing, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit that bell for more incredible stories from history and science.